Zara, you need to see this. It's Jackson. He's not who you think he is, my niece Mia said, her voice shaking as she showed me a photo on her phone. I stared in disbelief at the image. A candid shot of my husband Jackson with his arm around a tall blonde woman, laughing together at the airport. My stomach dropped. What? This can't be real, I said, my voice hollow. I snapped it yesterday when I was picking up my friend from her flight. I knew if I didn't show you, you'd never believe me, Aunt Zara, Mia replied. I felt sick with dread but tried to remain calm. Did you talk to him? Maybe it's just a misunderstanding. Mia shook her head. He didn't see me, but from how cozy they looked, I don't think it was just a friend. My mind reeled. Jackson and I had been married for 12 years. Was he really cheating on me? That night at dinner, I cautiously brought it up. Mia said she saw you with another woman at the airport yesterday, I began. Jackson laughed loudly, making me jump. Mia's got an active imagination, doesn't she? I picked up a client visiting from Dallas to show her a property. That's all. He scoffed. I searched his face for any hint of deception, but found none. Still, over the next few weeks, doubts plagued me. Jackson worked later, went on mysterious trips, and spent more time texting. One day, acting on impulse, I checked his pockets while doing laundry. In his crumpled pants was a hotel keycard and receipt for a suite at the Sebastian, downtown's most lavish hotel. Fueled by adrenaline, I grabbed my car keys. Time to learn the truth. I arrived at the hotel, hands trembling, and took the elevator to the fifth-floor suite. As I raised my hand to knock, the door swung open, and there was Jackson, half-dressed with the same blonde from Mia's photo. Cassidy, I thought you were just... Jackson froze mid-sentence when he saw me. Zara! He cried. What are you doing here? My body shook with rage and anguish. I was right not to trust you, I choked out. The blonde, Cassidy, slunk out, avoiding eye contact. Jackson scrambled for his shirt. Zara, I can explain. Don't bother, I said coldly. Without another word, I turned and strode rapidly toward the elevators, tears stinging my eyes. His web of lies had finally unraveled. My husband was not the man I thought I knew at all. I drove aimlessly for hours, my mind racing. How long had Jackson's affair been going on, and how had I never noticed? When I finally returned home, Jackson was waiting on the porch. Thank God, I was so worried, he said, rushing toward me. I backed away, repulsed. Don't come near me, you liar, I said sharply. Jackson's facade crumbled. Baby, I messed up, okay? I didn't mean for it to happen. Save it, I snarled. I saw you with her at the hotel. Her name's Cassidy, right? Jackson paled. Cassidy? She doesn't mean anything to me, Zara. It was just a stupid fling. I fought the urge to slap him. A fling? We're married. How long has this been going on? He turned his gaze downward. I don't know. A few months, maybe? Months, I cried. Blinding fury washed over me. Without thinking, I grabbed my suitcase from the front closet and started throwing clothes inside. Whoa, take it easy, Jackson said, eyes wide. Where are you going? I'm leaving. Obviously, I scoffed bitterly. I'll be at my sister's. Panic flashed across Jackson's face. He blocked my path to the door. Be reasonable, Zara. You don't have to leave. I pushed past him, seething. I won't stay under the same roof as a lying, cheating snake. Jackson chased me to my car. I said I was sorry. I'll end things with Cassidy, I swear. We can get counseling, move past this. I whirled around to face him one last time, tears stinging my eyes. The man I loved would never betray me like this. I don't know who you are anymore. Jackson, we're done. I peeled out of the driveway just as the tears began to fall, leaving Jackson helplessly shouting after me. My heart ached with grief and bitterness, but I refused to let him see me crumble. He wasn't worthy of my tears. Now I knew the painful truth about the stranger Jackson had become. It was time to pick myself back up. I spent the next few days at my sister Ivy's apartment trying to process it all. But my raging mind wouldn't rest. I had to know more, like how Jackson financed his sordid affair when we struggled to save money every month. I met my friend AJ, a tech wizard, for lunch. Can you track someone's credit card purchases without them knowing? I asked. His eyes widened. On the dark web, sure. This about Jackson? I nodded, steeling my nerves. Later, AJ sent me a list of expensive hotel charges over the past 4 months and jewelry purchases. Must be for his mistress, AJ noted. The reality sunk like a stone in my gut. Jackson hadn't just cheated, he'd spent a fortune on Cassidy behind my back. Fury simmered inside me. It was time to uncover the extent of my husband's betrayal. If he thought he could get away with it, he was dead wrong. A few days later, I bought hair dye, preppy clothes, and blue contact lenses, the perfect disguise to follow Jackson unnoticed. I told Ivy I needed to work, but really, I was parked outside Jackson's office, spying from a rental car. At noon, Jackson finally emerged, stopping at the florist. To my disgust, he exited carrying a massive bouquet of roses. He continued downtown, ducking into the Sebastian, the same hotel where I'd caught him with Cassidy. This time, instead of barging into their suite, I discreetly trailed Jackson to the bar where Cassidy waited in a slinky dress that likely cost more than my car. Jackson kissed her. Grinning, my blood boiled. Just then, Jackson's phone rang. His face fell. "It's the hospital," he told Cassidy. "Let me take this outside." As Jackson hurried out, I seized the chance, sliding onto the bar stool beside Cassidy. She glanced at me, puzzled. "I know what you're doing with my husband," I said fiercely. Cassidy recoiled. "Excuse me? I don't even know you." "I'm Zara, Jackson's wife," I said coldly. Cassidy paled, speechless. Before she could respond, Jackson returned, ashen-faced. His eyes darted wildly between us. "Zara?" he croaked. "There's been an accident. My dad." He wavered on his feet. My anger evaporated, replaced by shock. Despite everything, I still cared for him once. I took his arm gently. "Come on," I said quietly. "Let's get you to the hospital." Cassidy backed away wordlessly into the crowd as I led Jackson outside, holding back my whirlwind of accusations, for now. At the hospital, Jackson collapsed into a chair, head in hands. "The nurse said Dad's car was hit by a drunk driver. He's in surgery now," Jackson choked out. My heart ached for him. I clasped his shoulder gently. "He'll pull through. Your dad's resilient." Jackson nodded wordlessly. Hours passed with no update. When the nurse finally appeared, her somber expression said it all. Jackson's dad hadn't made it. Jackson dissolved, sobbing uncontrollably. I held him close, letting his tears soak into my shirt. Despite Jackson's ghastly choices, he was still family. Over the next few days, as funeral arrangements were made, I supported Jackson quietly behind the scenes, putting my simmering fury on hold. The day of the funeral came, a small, mournful affair. After the burial, I drove Jackson back to his place so he could change for the wake. But when we pulled up, police swarmed the sidewalk. "What happened?" Jackson asked a cop. "Nasty wreck earlier. Speeding vehicle crashed into that tree. 2 people were critically injured." Dread filled my stomach. As the ambulance pulled away, I spotted a flash of blonde hair on the stretcher. Cassidy. Jackson blanched. He must have realized, too. We followed the police to the hospital and learned Cassidy had been driving Jackson's beloved vintage Mercedes, with Jackson in the passenger seat when she lost control. The officer shook his head. Witnesses said she raced through 2 red lights before crashing. We suspect drunk driving. The news stunned me. Jackson could have died cheating on me with Cassidy. Overwhelmed, I stepped aside to compose myself. A nurse approached with an evidence bag containing Jackson's damaged cell phone cracked from the wreck. "We can hold his personal effects until he's released," she offered gently. On impulse, I took the phone. "I'll handle it, thanks," I murmured. Once Jackson stabilized, they'd transfer him to a regular room. I had time to access his phone, to understand the full picture. I met my friend Ajay at his repair shop and handed him the phone. "Any chance you can get inside this to access text messages and photos?" "Shouldn't be an issue," Ajay said. Within the hour, he'd downloaded the data onto a disk. "I don't know what you're looking for, but seems like this guy's up to no good," Ajay warned. My hands trembled, imagining what secrets the disk held. "That's what I'm afraid of," I said gravely. Alone at home, I loaded the disk on my laptop with trembling hands. Photo after sorted photo filled the screen. Jackson and Cassidy entwined, wearing nothing. Receipts and texts arranging their trysts covered months. Even worse, screenshots showed Jackson transferring money from my personal account into his, thousands of dollars gone. I squeezed my eyes shut, tasting bile. The man I'd loved for 12 years had stolen my money to finance his affair, deceiving me at every turn. It was time to make Jackson face the truth and pay the price for his callous betrayal. Armed with the incriminating data from Jackson's phone, I set up a meeting with my lawyer, Carlos. He scanned through the evidence, eyebrows rising. "This is quite serious," Carlos said. "Illicit transfers from your personal account without permission constitutes fraud and theft. Combined with the affair, you have solid grounds for divorce." My chest tightened. After 12 years together, divorcing Jackson felt unreal. Let's focus first on freezing your joint accounts before he empties them, Carlos continued. I'll also file a temporary restraining order. When he's discharged, legally he cannot come near you or the home you share. I nodded, steeling my nerves. The cold machinations now seemed necessary. 2 days later, I sat rigidly in Carlos's tight office as he made the call, confronting Jackson over speakerphone. Mr. Kent, I represent your wife, Zara. We have evidence here of fraud and infidelity. As of now, your joint accounts are frozen. You're also legally prohibited from approaching Miss Kent or your shared residence per the temporary restraining order issued this morning. The line went silent. Finally, Jackson sputtered in rage. Who the hell do you think you are? You can't just lock me out. Carlos glanced at me. The court order says otherwise, Mr. Kent. Will you comply, or shall I have officers waiting at your discharge? You betch, Jackson snarled. You won't get away with this, Zara. That's my house, too. I flinched but kept my tone cool. I'm done being your personal ATM, Jackson. Consider this the consequence of your actions. The call ended explosively, with Jackson hurling threats until nurses hauled him away. Shaken, I retreated home, now owned solely by me. For days, tension knotted my stomach as I awaited Jackson's next move. A week later, the doorbell rang. My eyes widened in alarm until I saw Jackson's sister Harper on the video feed. I swung the door open. Harper, is everything okay? She shifted on her feet. Hey, Zara, do you have a minute? I waved her in, puzzled. Since the funeral, I hadn't seen Harper or the rest of Jackson's family. Harper sat down, not meeting my eyes. I heard about the restraining order and Jackson cleaning out your accounts. My shoulders slumped as I sank down beside her. You probably think I'm just bitter and crazy, but he was cheating on me for months, Harper, and stealing money to fund his lifestyle with some woman named Cassidy. Harper nodded slowly. I know. I didn't at first, but I overheard Jackson on the phone with Cassidy. The things he said, the way he spoke to her. She shuddered. He was cruel, degrading. I realized I didn't know my own brother anymore. Tears shone in Harper's eyes. My heart twisted in empathy. Betrayal by family cut especially deep. Harper grasped my hand fiercely. You did the right thing escaping from him, Zara. What he did was unforgivable, and I want to help you make sure he doesn't get away with it. Relief washed over me. I wasn't alone anymore in this fight. Harper's solidarity awakened a powerful sense of vindication. With the truth exposed, Jackson would finally reap the misery he'd sown, starting with losing his most precious relationships, the foundation of his deceitful life. In the weeks following my confrontation with Jackson, I leaned heavily on Harper's support. We met often for coffee or wine, hashing out my next moves. Have you decided whether you'll meet him in court or settle outside? Harper asked one evening. I swirled the wine in my glass. Jackson's too volatile for meetings. I'll let the judge force him to pay up. Harper nodded firmly. Good. He deserves the public shame. I sighed. My lawyer says proving the affair gives us leverage for maximum restitution, but rehashing all the sordid details. I shook my head, pained. Harper clasped my hand. You're so much stronger than Jackson gives you credit for, Zara. Don't worry. I'll be right by your side when you face him in court. Her steadfast solidarity bolstered me. With Harper at my side, I could withstand Jackson's wrath long enough to expose his deceit in court. Financial restitution seemed hollow compared to what I'd lost, but hitting Jackson where it hurt most was the only path to justice. A few days before our hearing, Jackson shocked us both by showing up unannounced at my door, ignoring the restraining order. Zara, please, can we talk about this? He implored, clutching wilted flowers. Before I could react, Harper appeared behind me. Get off this property before I call the police, Jackson, she threatened. Jackson's face darkened. Stay out of this, Harper. This is between me and my wife. The possessive way he said my wife made my skin crawl. Harper stepped forward furiously. Former wife, because you decided to lie and steal instead of honoring your vows. I always defended you, Jackson, but now you disgust me. Jackson flushed angrily. You know nothing, Harper. This witch turned my whole family against me. He jabbed his finger at me. My fury boiled over. You did this to yourself, Jackson. Now get out before the cops drag you out. With a menacing glare, Jackson stormed off. I sagged in relief against Harper. Tomorrow, come hell or high water, my ex would get exactly what he deserved. At the courthouse, Harper squeezed my shoulder as we took our seats. I'm right here with you, she murmured. Across the aisle, Jackson sat alone, his eyes swollen and hair disheveled. For an instant, pity tempered my simmering vitriol. Then I remembered the trauma his lies inflicted, and my resolve strengthened. When the judge called my name, I strode forward steadily. I would walk out of here vindicated and finally free from Jackson's poisonous hold. Please describe for the court the events that led to today's hearing, the judge prompted gently. I steadied myself. I learned my husband Jackson was having an affair. When I confronted him, he promised to end things, but he continued sneaking around behind my back. I proceeded to calmly detail Jackson's lies and deceit over months, culminating in stealing my money to fund his lavish outings with his mistress Cassidy. Jackson's lawyer questioned me vigorously, but faltered when I presented the evidence from Jackson's phone. The judge considered me soberly. This deception went on at length. Why stay with a serial philanderer and fraud? I stood taller. Because I loved him once, deeply. I'm here now because his actions forced me to protect myself. The judge nodded and turned to Jackson. Mr. Kent, how do you plead to these allegations of infidelity, fraud, and theft? Jackson burst out of his chair. It's bull, all of it. She's making me out to be a monster over one mistake. He pointed at me, hand shaking. Murmurs filled the courtroom. The judge pounded his gavel sharply. That's enough, Mr. Kent. Maintain composure or I'll hold you in contempt. Jackson slowly sat but glared at me malevolently. I glared back, undaunted. After a painfully long debate, the judge rendered his verdict in my favor. The evidence presented confirms Mr. Kent violated marital trust through chronic infidelity and fraud. As restitution, this court orders an equitable division of assets, including one-time alimony payment to Ms. Zara Kent. He banged the gavel finality. I hugged Harper tightly in dizzy relief. It was over. I was free. At the plaintiff's table, Jackson stood slowly, regarding me with icy calmness. Congratulations, Zara. You won, he said cuttingly. I hope destroying my life was worth it. Adrenaline coursed through me. I didn't destroy anything. I just revealed the truth, something you could never face. I held his gaze unflinchingly. We're over, Jackson. This was your doing. His lips curled in a snarl. You'll regret this, Zara, he spat venomously. Before the bailiffs could react, he stormed out. I stood frozen, pulse thrumming. Harper gripped my shoulder. Don't let him scare you. His threats are just pathetic attempts at control, she said. He's the one who needs to move on now. I nodded, shaking off my unease. She was right. Jackson no longer had any hold over me. And once his family and Cassidy realized the truth too, he'd truly be left with nothing. A fitting outcome for his cruelty. In the months following the trial, I finally felt I could breathe again. Jackson vanished from my life just as completely as our marriage had. Only Harper provided glimpses of his downward spiral. His girlfriend Cassidy left him when she found out about the money he owes you, Harper revealed over lunch one day. And without her bankrolling his lifestyle, he's scrambling. I shook my head. After all the warnings about her, now he's alone and struggling? Talk about karma. Harper smiled ruefully. Also, quite the scandal for his career. Clients dropped him when word of the lawsuits got around. While I took no pleasure in Jackson's misery, it was clear he deserved it. And the alimony checks he resentfully sent each month ensured I could rebuild my life. On my birthday a few months later, Harper stopped by with champagne and news. Cheers to your fresh start, we clinked glasses. I actually have an update on Jackson's current crash and burn, she added. I raised an eyebrow. His ruined career and relationships were already karmic payback. So get this, Harper continued, leaning in furtively. Jackson put his house on the market. He's so desperate for cash, he sold it way under value. My eyes widened. His dream house that he made me sacrifice for? Geez. Almost sheepishly, Harper went on. Well, funny you should mention sacrifice, because the buyer was Ray Hernandez. I nearly choked on my champagne. Ray? My ex that Jackson always hated? Harper nodded, grinning. Yep, Ray seized the chance to stick it to Jackson, and Jackson was apparently seething, but financial hands were tied. The irony was so absurd I burst out laughing. Jackson's precious house ending up with his nemesis Ray? You really couldn't make this stuff up. In his greed and dishonesty, Jackson had sabotaged everything stable in his life. Now all that remained was facing the music alone. And music never sounded sweeter. To good riddance, Harper cheered, raising her glass again triumphantly. The relief I'd yearned for was finally here. Freedom from Jackson's toxicity and lies. His bitterness over losing our old house to my ex was just icing on the cake of karma, now enjoying her sweet revenge. And I planned to relish every bite. Walking into my house, the atmosphere felt unsettlingly silent, a stark contrast to the vibrant surprise I had imagined all day. "I'm home," I announced, my voice echoing through the empty space, expecting to see my husband Nate's smiling face or hear our daughter's giggles. Instead, a pair of unfamiliar high heels caught my attention, an intrusion in our cozy nest. Curiosity morphed into confusion as I followed the trail leading to the living room. There, framed by the soft glow of the afternoon sun, stood Nate, his arm casually draped over the shoulders of a woman I had never seen before. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was the intimacy of their posture that stung. "Happy birthday, Eliza," Nate greeted, his grin wide and unsettling. "Who's this?" My voice was steady, despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "Our guest for today," Nate replied nonchalantly. "Meet Alex Carter, my lover." The room spun as his words sunk in. "Lover?" I echoed, disbelief clouding my judgment. "Yes, and since it's your birthday, I thought it's the perfect time to give you your present." Nate's tone was eerily calm as he handed me an envelope. Inside, the words divorce agreement screamed back at me, a cruel joke masquerading as a gift. This is a joke, right?" The words barely escaped my lips, each syllable a struggle. "No joke, Eliza. I want a divorce. I'm in love with Alex," Nate declared, as if discussing the weather, not dismantling our life together. The coldness in his eyes, the ease with which he shattered our vows, was more painful than the betrayal itself. "You want to throw away our life for a fling? Alex is not a fling. This is real. And you're just not enough anymore." His words were a knife, each syllable twisting deeper. The woman, Alex, remained silent, a spectator to the wreckage of my marriage. "Enough, Nate. If you want this divorce, you'll regret it. But you'll get what you wish for," I said, my voice laced with a calmness I didn't feel. Nate's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. "You think you can make me regret this? Watch me." My reply was a whisper, a promise of the storm to come. As I turned to leave, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on me. My marriage, the love I thought we shared, was over. But in its ashes, a resolve was born. Nate would regret this betrayal, not today, but soon, and I would make sure of it. The silence of my bedroom offered no comfort as I lay awake, the scene from earlier replaying in my mind. The audacity of Nate's betrayal, his cruel unveiling of his affair on my birthday, was a wound that festered with each passing second. But it was his next actions that solidified my resolve for revenge. The morning after the revelation, Nate had the nerve to sit at the breakfast table as if nothing had happened. He poured himself coffee, the normalcy of the act a slap in my face. Alex was nowhere to be seen, but her presence lingered like a bad smell. "Nate," I started, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "You really think you can just replace me with her? And on my birthday?" He shrugged, a gesture so filled with indifference it fueled my anger. Timing was coincidental. "But yes, I think Alex and I will be very happy." "Happy?" I scoffed. "You destroy our family for a fling, and you think you'll be happy?" "Alex is not a fling," Nate snapped, his facade slipping for the first time. "She understands me, unlike you." "Understands you? Or flatters your ego?" I retorted, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Nate's eyes narrowed. "What would you know about understanding? You're just convenient." The word struck me, a verbal blow that was meant to hurt. "Convenient?" I repeated, the absurdity of the situation suddenly clear. "Well, let's see how convenient life is without me handling everything for you." Nate's confidence wavered, a hint of realization dawning. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying, enjoy your happiness with Alex. But remember, actions have consequences. You'll see." I left the table, leaving Nate to ponder my words. The next steps were clear in my mind. Nate had chosen his path, blinded by infatuation and arrogance. He had underestimated me, thinking I would crumble under his betrayal. He was wrong. As I started planning, the idea of revenge wasn't just a fleeting thought. It was a promise. Nate would realize the gravity of his mistake, not just in losing me, but in underestimating my resolve. The betrayal had shattered something within me. But from those pieces, a new, determined Eliza was emerging, one that Nate would soon learn to fear. A month had swiftly passed since Nate's unfathomable betrayal, and the wounds he inflicted remained raw. Yet amidst the turmoil, a plan had taken root, one that promised not just revenge, but a revelation of Nate's folly. The day I decided to confront Nate and Alex was ordinary, with the sun casting a warm glow over what was to be the stage of Nate's unraveling. I found them together in the living room, their laughter a jarring melody in what used to be a home filled with genuine joy. Enjoying ourselves, are we? My voice cut through their merriment, causing Nate to stiffen and Alex to silence. Nate, we need to talk. About the divorce. And about Alex, I said, my tone leaving no room for the usual deflections. Nate eyed me warily, sensing the shift in my demeanor. What about it? It's about her famous writer status. You see, working in publishing, I have a good memory for authors. And Alex, I turned my gaze to the person who had invaded my life. I can't seem to recall any of your work. Alex's confidence seemed to waver under my scrutiny, a crack in the facade they had so carefully maintained. Nate, however, laughed off my accusation. You think you know every writer out there? I know enough to recognize a lie when I see one, I retorted sharply. Nate's amusement faded, replaced by a flicker of concern. What are you getting at, Eliza? Simply put, I doubt Alex is who you think she is, and I intend to find out the truth. The threat hung heavy in the air, a challenge to the web of deceit they had woven. Nate's reaction was immediate and defensive, a sign I had struck a nerve. You're just jealous, Eliza. You can't stand the thought of me being happy with someone else. Jealous? The accusation was laughable, and I let my disbelief show. No, Nate, I'm curious, and I'm going to do a little digging. Let's see what truths come to light. I left them with those parting words, a promise of the storm to come. The confrontation was not just about exposing lies. It was about reclaiming my power, about showing Nate that his betrayal would not leave me broken, but stronger, more determined. As I began my investigation into Alex's supposed literary fame, the pieces started falling into place. Each discovery, each lie uncovered, was a step closer to my revenge. Nate had chosen his path, blinded by lust and deception. He had failed to see the strength in me, mistaking my love for weakness. But as the truth about Alex began to unravel, so too would Nate's illusions. The confrontation was just the beginning. The real drama was yet to unfold, and I would ensure Nate watched as his world crumbled around him, piece by piece. My investigation into Alex Carter's background revealed a web of lies so intricate it was almost impressive. Armed with undeniable proof, I confronted Nate and Alex, determined to expose the deceit that had upended my life. I found them in what used to be our shared home office, now a testament to Nate's betrayal. Without preamble, I laid out the evidence I had gathered. Alex Carter, or should I say Alex Connors, not a writer, but quite the actor. Nate's face paled, a stark contrast to Alex's growing unease. What are you talking about, Eliza? Did you really think you could fool me? Your famous writer is nothing more than a fabricator of lies. There's no record of any Alex Carter publishing anything. But Alex Connors, on the other hand, has quite a history of deception. What Alex attempted to interject, but I wasn't finished. Save it. I'm not interested in anything you have to say. Turning to Nate, I continued, You brought this person into our lives, into our daughter's life, based on what, a fantasy? Nate stumbled over his words, the reality of the situation finally dawning on him. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. You were too blinded by whatever it is you thought you found in Alex. But the truth, it's far from the illusion you've been living. The confrontation was not just about exposing Alex. It was a reckoning for Nate. The man who had promised to love and cherish me, forsaking all others, had instead chosen a path of betrayal and lies. I want you out, I said, my voice devoid of the love and warmth it once held for Nate. Out of this house and out of our lives. You've made your choice, and now you'll live with the consequences. Nate tried to argue, to plead for understanding, but there was nothing left to discuss. You made your bed, Nate. Now you get to lie in it. Alone. As Nate and Alex gathered their things, the finality of the moment settled over me. This was not the life I had envisioned, but it was the one I was left with. Yet, in the midst of the chaos and heartbreak, a sense of empowerment began to take root. Nate's descent was of his own making, a direct result of his actions and choices. Watching them leave, I knew this was only the beginning. Nate's betrayal had unleashed a storm within me, one that would not be satisfied until justice was served. My revenge had only just begun, and Nate would soon realize the true cost of his actions. In the aftermath of Nate's revelation, I had expected him to retreat, to lick his wounds in private. Instead, he showed up at my doorstep, looking more haggard than I had ever seen him. The desperation in his eyes was palpable as he stood there, waiting for me to speak first. "What do you want, Nate?" My voice was cold, unwelcoming. I need to talk to you. About Alex and everything." He stumbled over his words, a man defeated. I considered turning him away, letting him drown in the mess he had made. But curiosity, and admittedly a desire to witness his suffering up close, compelled me to let him in. We sat across from each other, the air thick with tension. Nate was the first to break the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. "Alex, he wasn't who I thought he was. I was fooled, Eliza." "Fooled? Or too blinded by your own betrayal to see the truth?" I couldn't help the bitterness that seeped into my words. It was all a lie, his identity, his story. I don't even know who he is anymore. "And you think this confession changes anything between us?" Nate looked down, shame etched into every line of his face. "I know I've made unforgivable mistakes, but Eliza, you have to believe me. I was deceived." The conversation was a farce, a pathetic attempt by Nate to garner sympathy where none was due. But as much as I despised him for what he had done, I couldn't ignore the implications of his deceit. "So, what do you plan to do now? Crawl back to the life you so carelessly threw away?" Nate's eyes met mine, a flicker of hope in their depths. I was hoping we could start over. Maybe not as a couple, but as friends?" The suggestion was laughable. Friends after everything he had done? "Nate, you destroyed our family. You chose Alex over your own wife and daughter, and now you come here seeking friendship?" I know it's a lot to ask, but I don't know where else to turn." The pathetic sight of him, a man broken by his own choices, stirred something in me. Not pity, but a resolve to see this revenge through to the end. "Nate, you need to leave. There's nothing for you here. Not anymore." He nodded, a man resigned to his fate, and stood to leave. But before he could reach the door, I stopped him with a final thought. "Let this be a lesson, Nate. You can't play with people's lives and expect to walk away unscathed. Karma always finds a way." With that, Nate walked out of my life, leaving behind a trail of destruction and a path to a new beginning for me. His exposure was complete, his illusions shattered. And as for me, the next chapter of my life was just beginning, one where I would rebuild stronger, wiser, and without the shadow of Nate's betrayal hanging over me. As the door closed behind him, I felt a sense of closure. The drama and revenge had played out, leaving behind a lesson in its wake. For Nate, a future filled with regret. And for me, a world of possibilities, free from the chains of a love that had turned toxic. The story of Nate and Alex was a cautionary tale, one that would serve as a reminder of the price of deceit. And as I looked ahead, I knew that the best revenge was not just in the suffering of those who had wronged me, but in the life I would build from the ashes of their betrayal. The days following Nate's departure were filled with a quiet that spoke volumes. It was the calm after the storm, a peace I had longed for yet felt oddly unsettling. The final act of my revenge was nearing, the stage set for a confrontation that would seal Nate's fate and liberate me from the past. I was sorting through the last of Nate's belongings, a symbolic gesture of closure, when the doorbell rang. Standing on my doorstep was not Nate, as I had half expected, but Alex, no longer the confident interloper but a figure of confusion and regret. "Eliza, may I come in?" Alex's voice was timid, a stark contrast to the boldness I had witnessed before. I hesitated, my initial instinct to shut the door in his face, but the desire for answers, for an understanding of the role Alex had played in this sordid tale stayed my hand. Inside, Alex sat awkwardly, a man out of place in a home that had once been filled with laughter and love. I owe you an apology," Alex began, his gaze fixed on the floor. "For everything." "An apology?" I echoed, the words sounding hollow. "Do you even understand what you've done?" Alex flinched, the weight of his actions a visible burden. I realized now I was a tool in Nate's game. I believed his lies, just as you did. The confession was unexpected, a glimpse into the complexity of the situation I hadn't considered. "You were fooled by him too?" "Yes. I thought we had something real, but I was just convenient, for lack of a better word." The irony of the situation was not lost on me. Alex, much like myself, had been deceived by Nate's facade. But while my pain stemmed from a betrayal of vows, Alex's was born of a misplaced trust. And now? I asked, curiosity overcoming my resentment. Now I'm left with nothing. No Nate, no future, just the fallout of a relationship built on lies. The conversation was a revelation, the lines between victim and villain blurred. Alex's role in my story was not as clear-cut as I had believed. His presence not the cause of my suffering, but a symptom of Nate's deceit. You know, Alex, I spent so long blaming you, hating you for what happened, but now, I see that we were both pawns in Nate's game. Alex looked up, his eyes meeting mine for the first time since he had entered. I never meant to hurt you, Eliza. I hope you can believe that. I do, I replied, the truth of the statement surprising even myself. And I hope you can move on from this, learn from it as I have. As Alex stood to leave, there was a mutual understanding between us, an acknowledgement of the pain we had shared and the strength found in its wake. Thank you, Eliza, for listening, and for the forgiveness I don't deserve. With that, Alex walked out of my life, leaving behind a story of love, betrayal, and the search for redemption. And as I watched him go, I realized that the best revenge was not in the suffering inflicted on those who wrong us, but in the grace we find within ourselves to move beyond the pain. The fallout of Nate's betrayal had brought me to the lowest point in my life, but it had also shown me the resilience of the human spirit, the capacity for forgiveness, and the endless possibilities that lay on the other side of forgiveness. My story with Nate had ended, but my journey was just beginning, a journey of healing, discovery, and newfound freedom. And as the door closed behind Alex, I felt a chapter of my life closing with it, making way for a new beginning, one where the scars of the past would no longer define my future.
The knock came during dinner prep, while I was chopping carrots for Nolan's birthday stew. Through the kitchen window, late afternoon sunlight caught the copper wind chimes Sarah had made in 3rd grade, sending warm reflections dancing across my cutting board. Coming. I wiped my hands and headed for the door, expecting Mrs. Peterson returning another borrowed casserole dish. Instead, a woman I'd never seen before stood on my porch, her manicured fingers fidgeting with an expensive-looking handbag. Mrs. Hartwell. Her voice was soft but steady. I'm Camille Rivers. I need to speak with you about Nolan. Something in her tone made my stomach clench. He's at work. Is everything okay? May I come in? This isn't a conversation for your front porch. I hesitated, then stepped aside. As she passed, her perfume, something expensive and floral, filled the entryway. I led her to the living room, where family photos lined the walls. Sarah's graduation, our family vacation in Maine, Nolan teaching Orion to fish. Would you like some tea? I offered automatically, mother's instincts kicking in despite my unease. No, thank you. Camille perched on the edge of our worn leather couch, her designer outfit looking out of place against the familiar cushions. I've been seeing Nolan for the past 8 months. I'm pregnant, and he's the father. The words hit like a physical blow. I gripped the doorframe, steadying myself. I don't understand. We met at that real estate conference in Chicago last summer. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos. I thought you should know. He's been less than honest with both of us. My eyes fixed on the screen she held out. Nolan, my husband of 27 years, kissing this stranger in what looked like a hotel lobby. The timestamp showed 3 weeks ago. Get out. My voice came out barely above a whisper. Mrs. Hartwell, Alara, I know this is difficult, but get out of my house. Louder now, steadier. Now. She stood, smoothing her skirt. I'll leave my number. When you're ready to talk. There's nothing to talk about. I walked to the front door, holding it open. As she passed, she slipped a business card onto the entry table. After she left, I returned to the kitchen on autopilot. The carrots sat unfinished on the cutting board, knife abandoned mid-chop. I picked it up, the familiar weight grounding me as my world tilted sideways. The garage door hummed to life. Nolan's footsteps, the same rhythm I'd known for nearly 3 decades, approached through the mudroom. Something smells good, he called out. Need any help with Elle? What's wrong? I turned slowly, still gripping the knife. Camille Rivers was just here. His face went blank for a fraction of a second, just long enough to confirm everything. Then, who? Don't. The knife clattered into the sink. Don't you dare lie to me. Elle, whatever she told you. Is she pregnant? His silence was answer enough. I watched his face, searching for the man I'd married, the father of my children. Instead, I saw a stranger wearing my husband's features. I can explain, he started, reaching for me. I stepped back. Don't touch me.
Don't.
My voice broke. The stew's ruined. You'll need to find somewhere else for dinner.
And tonight.
And I swallowed hard. And after that too. Elara, please. We can work this out. Think about the kids, I am thinking about the kids. I met his eyes. I'm thinking about what kind of example I want to set for our daughter. For our son. I picked up Camille's business card from where I'd brought it to the kitchen.
Here.
You forgot something. I pressed the card into his hand and walked upstairs, leaving him standing in our kitchen, surrounded by the half-prepared remains of what should have been his birthday dinner. 3 days after Nolan left, Sarah showed up at the house unannounced. She stood in the doorway, her father's stubborn chin jutting forward as she clutched her phone. Dad called me. Her voice wavered. He said you kicked him out. I stepped aside to let her in, noting how she avoided my touch. That's not exactly what happened. He said he made a mistake, but you won't even talk to him. She paced our living room, where the familiar family photos now felt like artifacts from another life. People mess up, Mom. They deserve second chances. Sit down, sweetheart. I patted the couch beside me. There's more to it than what your father told you. Like what? She remained standing, arms crossed. He told me everything. About Camille, She swallowed hard. About the baby. Did he tell you about the 8 months of lies? About the business trips that weren't business trips? He's trying to make it right. Her voice cracked. Why won't you at least hear him out? My phone buzzed. Another message from Nolan. I'd stopped reading them after the 20th apology. Because this isn't just about the affair, Sarah. It's about trust, You're not even trying. She grabbed her purse. Dad's staying at Grandma and Grandpa's. He's miserable. He wants to come home.
Sarah?
I'm having dinner with him tonight. You should come. Just talk to him. I thought of the way he'd looked in our kitchen, scrambling for excuses while wearing the watch I'd given him for our anniversary. I can't. Won't, you mean? She headed for the door, then paused. You know what the worst part is? You're acting like you're the only one hurt by this.
But what about me?
What about Orion? That's exactly why. Save it. She yanked the door open. I'll tell Dad you said hi. After she left, I sat in the quiet house, surrounded by memories that felt tainted. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Rosalind, my mother-in-law. Elara, dear. Her familiar voice carried decades of warmth. Nolan's told us what happened. We're devastated, of course, but surely you two can work through this? For the children's sake. Rosalind. He's not perfect, dear, but he loves you. And that Camille woman, well, these young things know how to turn men's heads. I press my fingers to my temples. He's 42, not 17. And she's pregnant. Well, she paused delicately. Are we certain about that? What do you mean? Nolan says she's been unclear about details.
Dates.
Perhaps she's not being entirely truthful. Hope flickered traitorously in my chest. Has he said that? Why don't you come to dinner tonight? Sarah will be here. We can all talk this through like family. I thought of Nolan's face when Camille's name first came up, that split second of recognition before the lie. I can't, Rosalind. I'm sorry. After hanging up, I walked to our bedroom, my bedroom now, and opened Nolan's closet. His suits hung in neat rows, dry cleaning tags still attached to several. I pulled one out, checking the date. August 15th. The Chicago conference. My hands shook as I dialed the dry cleaner's number. Hi, yes. I'm calling about some suits dropped off by Nolan Hartwell. Oh, Mr.
Hartwell.
Yes, he's one of our regulars. Always needs rush service for his trips. The August 15th suits. Was that for Chicago? Chicago? No, those were for his Vegas weekend. He always goes to that casino convention in August. Been doing it for years. The phone slipped from my fingers. Casino, convention. Not real estate. Not Chicago. My gaze fell on our bedside table, where Nolan's bank statements lay unopened. With trembling fingers, I reached for the envelope, suddenly afraid of what other lies I might find. The bank statements spread across my kitchen table told a story so different from the one I'd believed. Credit card bills from casinos, cash advances, mysterious wire transfers, all hidden behind careful lies about business expenses and investment opportunities. My hands shook as I dialed our accountant's number. James? It's Ilera Hartwell. I need to know about our retirement accounts. His hesitation spoke volumes. I've been trying to reach Nolan about those. What do you mean? There were some irregular withdrawals. Large ones. I assumed you knew. The room tilted sideways. How large? Most of your joint savings. About 300,000. I gripped the chair to steady myself. When? The last withdrawal was 2 weeks ago. Ilera, I'm required to tell you. There's a federal investigation pending. Something about suspicious transactions. The doorbell rang, startling me. Through the window, I saw Orion shifting nervously on the porch, home early from soccer practice. I quickly gathered the papers. Thanks, James. I'll call you back. Orion burst in before I could fully compose myself. Mom? Why are there people taking pictures of our house? What people? He dropped his sports bag, frowning. Some guys in suits. They were parked across the street, but they left when I noticed them. My phone buzzed, Nolan's number. I declined the call, only to see 3 missed calls from Sarah and 2 from Rosalind. Before I could check the messages, another call came through Camille. Don't hang up, she said quickly. There's something you need to know about Nolan's gambling. I already know. No, you don't. The baby. It wasn't just an affair. He promised to pay off my brother's gambling debts if I helped him hide money from the feds. Said he needed someone they wouldn't connect to him. The room went cold. What are you saying? The pregnancy was a lie. He needed a distraction, something to explain why he was moving money around. I'm so sorry, Ilera. I never meant. Orion appeared in the doorway, his father's eyes looking back at me. Mom? What's wrong? I have to go, I told Camille, hanging up. Was that Dad? Orion asked. Is he coming home soon? Before I could answer, the doorbell rang again. This time, 2 men in dark suits stood on the porch, badges in hand. Mrs. Hartwell? I'm Agent Cooper with the FBI. We need to ask you some questions about your husband's financial activities. Orion stepped closer to me. Mom, go upstairs, honey. Start your homework. I'll be up soon. As he reluctantly climbed the stairs, I let the agents in, their presence filling our cozy living room with an official chill. Mrs. Hartwell, are you aware that your husband has been involved in a money laundering operation connected to several offshore gambling establishments? I thought of all those business trips, the late-night phone calls, the way he'd insisted on handling all our finances.
No.
We have evidence suggesting large sums were moved through your joint accounts. Did you authorize these transactions? My phone buzzed again, Sarah. The text preview showed, Mom, Dad's saying crazy things. He's threatening to. Mrs. Hartwell. I looked up at the agents, thinking of Orion upstairs, of Sarah's angry departure, of the life I thought I'd built. I need to call my lawyer. Agent Cooper nodded sympathetically. Of course. But Mrs. Hartwell, you should know, your husband disappeared from his parents' house an hour ago.
If he contacts you.
My phone lit up with another text from Sarah. He took Grandpa's gun. Mom, please answer. The second agent stepped forward. Mrs. Hartwell, are you all right? You've gone pale. But I couldn't respond, my eyes fixed on the final words of Sarah's text. He says he's coming home. 6 months after Nolan's arrest, I found myself at the Cedar Grove Community Center, helping set up for the annual fundraiser. The FBI had frozen our accounts, leaving me to rebuild from scratch. Teaching art classes here helped pay the bills, though barely. These tables need to be closer to the stage, called a voice I didn't recognize. A tall man with kind eyes was gesturing from across the room. "Sorry, I'm Aiden. New board member." "Ilera," I replied, lifting my end of the table. Though around here, I'm better known as that teacher whose husband laundered money for the mob. I hadn't meant to say it out loud, but Aiden just nodded, helping me position the table.
Ah, yes.
"And I'm that architect whose wife died in the car accident." Small towns. Something in his matter-of-fact tone made me smile. They do love their labels. We worked in comfortable silence until my phone buzzed, a collect call from the county jail. I declined it like always. "Bad news?" Aiden asked, noticing my expression. "Just
Ghosts.
I started arranging chairs. "My daughter hasn't spoken to me since her father's sentencing. She thinks I should have stood by him." "My daughter blamed me for her mother's death for 2 years," he said quietly. "Sometimes love looks like anger when it's hurting." Before I could respond, Martha from the board bustled over. "Ilera, dear, could you handle the art auction pieces? We need someone with experience to assess their value." The implied meaning was clear. Someone who wouldn't steal them. I felt my cheeks burn. "Actually," Aiden interrupted, "I need Ilera's help with the lighting design. Board priority." Martha retreated, flustered. Aiden turned to me. "I'm sorry. People can be. It's fine." I grabbed my purse. I should go anyway. Orion has soccer practice. "Mom, speak of the devil." My son stood in the doorway, still in his uniform. "Practice got canceled. But, Sarah's outside. She wants to talk to you." My heart jumped. Through the window, I could see my daughter pacing the parking lot, looking so much like her teenage self that it hurt. "Go," Aiden said softly. "I'll finish up here." Outside, Sarah wouldn't meet my eyes. "Dad wrote me from prison. He says
He says you knew about the gambling.
that you helped him hide it."
What?
"He has documents, Mom. Bank transfers you signed. He says you turned on him to save yourself." My hands shook. Those signatures were for a mortgage refinancing. He told me. "Stop lying." She thrust a paper at me. "Look, your signature, right there on the wire transfer to Grand Casino Resort." I stared at the familiar curve of my name, remembering signing papers Nolan had rushed me through during breakfast, during Orion's games, between classes. "Sarah, I never." "Save it." She backed away. "I'm moving to California with Ben. I can't be here anymore. Watching you pretend to be the victim when you helped destroy our family. Serafina, please." But she was already walking away, leaving me clutching a forged document that somehow looked perfectly real. Through my tears, I saw Aiden approaching cautiously. "Bad news?" he asked again, echoing our earlier conversation. I looked down at the paper in my hands, then at my son hovering uncertainly nearby. "I need a lawyer. A good one."
And
I took a deep breath. "And maybe a friend." "Well," he said, his steady presence somehow making the ground feel firmer beneath my feet, "you're in luck. I happen to know an excellent lawyer. And I make a decent friend, or so I'm told." For the first time in months, I felt something like hope stirring in my chest. But my phone buzzed again. Nolan's lawyer this time, reminding me that hope was a dangerous thing in a game where all the rules had changed. A year had passed since I'd first met Aiden when he slid a small velvet box across our dinner table. Orion watched with eager eyes while Isla, Aiden's daughter, filmed the moment on her phone. "You don't have to answer now," Aiden said softly. But I did. The ring slipped perfectly onto my finger, and for a moment, everything felt right. Until my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on the engagement. Dad wants to know if he can still walk me down the aisle."
Sarah.
My hands trembled. "She's getting married?" Aiden reached across the table, but before he could speak, another text arrived. "Ben and I set the date. December 15th. Prisons approved Dad's temporary release for the ceremony." "Mom," Orion's voice cracked with concern. "What's wrong?" I showed Aiden the messages.
His jaw tightened.
"They can't just release him without." "His lawyer arranged it," Isla interrupted, reading from her phone. Sarah just posted about it. She says,
Oh, what?
She says she wants both her fathers there. Real and chosen. The room went silent. Aiden's proposal ring suddenly felt heavy on my finger. I should call her, I said, standing. Aiden caught my hand. Think about what this means. Nolan out of prison at the wedding. He's still her father. He's also the man who forged your signature and tried to frame you for his crimes. My phone buzzed again. Rosalind this time. Nolan's so happy about the wedding. He says he hopes you and Aiden will be comfortable with the seating arrangements. Family table, of course. I stepped onto the back porch, needing air. Through the kitchen window, I could see Orion and Isla in intense discussion, while Aiden cleaned dishes with mechanical precision, his worry evident in every movement. Another text from Sarah. Ben's family is handling the expenses. Since Nolan had drained our accounts. Since I'd lost my house. Since everything we'd saved for her future had vanished into offshore gambling debts. The screen door creaked. Isla joined me, holding 2 wine glasses. Sarah and I used to be close, Before everything. We still text sometimes. You do? She nodded, handing me a glass. She's scared, Alara. She keeps asking about Dad, about how he helped me after Mom died. I think she's looking for permission to love both fathers. While one of them is trying to destroy the other's family, maybe that's why she needs this wedding so badly. To prove we can all exist in the same space without everything falling apart. My phone lit up one final time. A message from Nolan's prison email. I hear congratulations are in order. Don't worry about the wedding. I'll make sure Sarah understands exactly where everyone stands in the family hierarchy. It's the least I can do, considering everything you took from me. Isla read over my shoulder. Dad needs to see this. These aren't just threats anymore. No, I said, deleting the email. This is between me and Nolan. Alara. I won't let him ruin another wedding. Not Sarah's. Even if it means pretending everything's fine. Sitting at that family table while I'll handle it. I twisted the engagement ring on my finger. Tell your father. Tell him I need to make a call. Isla hesitated. To who? I looked through the window at Aiden, at the family we were building, then down at my phone where Sarah's wedding announcement glowed accusingly. To Camille Rivers. It's time to find out exactly what kind of deal she made with Nolan's lawyers and why she suddenly changed her story about the money laundering. And then I decide which matters more, exposing Nolan's lies or letting Sarah have her perfect wedding day. The choice felt impossible, but as I dialed Camille's number, I realized something. Sometimes being a mother meant choosing between what was right and what was necessary. I just wasn't sure which was which anymore. The December wind cut through my thin dress as I watched Nolan walk Sarah down the aisle of the small church. His prison-issued ankle monitor peeked beneath his tailored suit pants, a detail the wedding photographer would later edit out. Aiden squeezed my hand, but I barely felt it. All I could see was Nolan's triumphant smile as he placed Sarah's hand in Ben's, then took his seat in the front row, the father's place of honor. My place was 3 rows back, next to Aiden and our children. This seating arrangement had been Sarah's idea. To avoid tension, she'd said, not meeting my eyes. The ceremony blurred past until the minister asked, "Who gives this woman in marriage?" "Her father and I do," Nolan answered alone, his voice carrying clearly through the church. I felt Isla stiffen beside me. Orion grabbed my arm as I started to rise, shaking his head slightly. Not here.
Not now.
At the reception, I watched Nolan dance with our daughter, their heads bent close in conversation. My phone buzzed, a text from Camille. Check your email. Now. In the attached video, Nolan sat in what looked like a hotel room, counting stacks of cash. The money laundering operation goes deeper than anyone knows, Camille's message continued. He's still running it from prison, through Sarah's new husband's family business. My champagne glass slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor. Heads turned, including Nolan's. Our eyes met across the dance floor, and his smile widened. Mom, Sarah approached, her white dress catching the light. Dad wants a photo with both of us. Honey, we need to talk. About Ben's family business. Stop. Her voice turned hard. I know what you're doing. Dad warned me you might try something today. What? He told me about the fake evidence you're creating, trying to keep him in prison longer. She twisted her bouquet. I saw the doctored bank statements on your laptop. My heart stopped. What laptop? The one in your study. Dad's lawyer found them when they were gathering evidence for his appeal. The timestamps prove you've been falsifying documents. The room spun. I hadn't owned a laptop since Nolan's arrest. The FBI had taken everything, which meant, there you are. Nolan appeared, wrapping an arm around Sarah. Ready for that photo? Actually, Aiden stepped forward. I think Alara needs some air. Nonsense. Nolan's grip on Sarah tightened. It's our daughter's wedding day. Surely we can manage one photo. Our daughter. The words escaped before I could stop them. You forged my signature, stole her college fund, and now you're using her husband's family too. Mom, Sarah jerked away from both of us. This is exactly why I didn't want you involved in the wedding planning. You can't let anything go. Sweetheart, Nolan soothed. Your mother's just having trouble accepting that people can change, that families can heal. Is that what you call framing me with fake evidence? I demanded. Healing. The music stopped. Guests stared. Ben's parents whispered among themselves. Security. Nolan called calmly. I believe we discussed this possibility. 2 men in dark suits approached. Mrs. Hartwell, please come with us. You can't be serious, Aiden started, but Sarah cut him off.
Just go, Mom. Please.
Before you ruin everything else. As the guards escorted me out, I caught a glimpse of Nolan pulling our daughter close, comforting her. Through the window, I watched him raise his champagne glass in a toast, his ankle monitor glinting beneath his suit, a reminder that sometimes the prison you can see isn't the one that holds you tightest. Outside in the cold, Aiden's arms found me, but I barely felt them. All I could think about was Camille's video, the planted laptop, and the terrible realization that Nolan hadn't just stolen my daughter, he'd turned her into his strongest weapon against me. 2 weeks after Sarah's wedding, Camille called me at midnight. Turn on the news.
Now.
I fumbled for the remote as Aiden stirred beside me. The screen flickered to life, showing Ben's family's investment firm surrounded by FBI agents. Breaking news. Major money laundering operation uncovered at Preston Investment Group. Sources say the scheme involves multiple prison inmates directing operations through family members. My phone buzzed again, Sarah. Mom, they're arresting Ben's parents. Dad says you did this. Tell me you didn't. A pounding at our front door cut me off. Through the peephole, I saw Nolan, his ankle monitor blinking angry red. Aiden, I whispered. Get Orion out through the back.
Now.
I'm not leaving you. Please. I pressed Camille's USB drive into his hand. Get this to the FBI. It's everything they need. The pounding grew louder. Open up, Elle. You've destroyed enough families tonight. I opened the door to find Nolan wild-eyed, rain-soaked. How dare you drag Ben's family into this? Me? I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me. You're the one who used our daughter's in-laws to launder money. I was protecting her future, making sure she had what you couldn't provide after you ruined everything. By making her complicit in your crimes? By turning her against. Against who? The mother who abandoned her father? Who moved on with a replacement family while I rotted in prison? Lightning illuminated his face, and for a moment, I saw something break behind his eyes. You never understood, he whispered. Everything I did, the gambling, the money, it was to be enough. For her.
For you. No.
I stepped closer. It was to feel powerful. To prove you could control everything and everyone around you. Like you're doing now? Destroying Ben's family to get back at me? I didn't call the FBI. I met his gaze. Camille did. She kept evidence of everything, the real evidence, not your planted laptop files. She was your insurance policy, wasn't she? Except she found out about the offshore accounts you hid from her too. His face contorted. You're lying. Check your phone, Nolan. Check the news. Camille's turning state's evidence as we speak. He lunged forward, but before he could reach me, Sarah's voice cut through the rain. Don't touch her. We turned to find our daughter on the lawn, Ben beside her, both drenched and devastated. Sarah, honey, Nolan started. The FBI showed me everything. She cut him off. The real documents. The videos. How you used Ben's family. Her voice broke. How you used me. I did it for you. You did it for yourself. She was crying now, rain mixing with tears. And I chose you over Mom. I let you manipulate me into thinking she was the villain. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Nolan's ankle monitor blinked faster. It's over, I said softly. Let her go, Nolan. Let us all go. He looked at Sarah one last time, then at me. You think this makes you win? You've still lost her. She'll never forgive either of us now. Maybe not. Sarah stepped forward, taking my hand. But at least Mom never asked me to choose. As police cars surrounded the house, I held my daughter while they arrested her father, again. But this time, when he looked back, there was no triumph in his eyes. Only the hollow recognition that in trying to possess his family, he'd finally, irrevocably lost us. Through the rain, I saw Aiden return with Orion, the USB drive safely delivered. Sarah's grip on my hand tightened, and I realized that sometimes winning isn't about revenge at all. Sometimes it's about being there to catch the pieces when everything falls apart. 6 months after Nolan's second arrest, I sat in our backyard watching Sarah plant tulip bulbs in the spring soil. She'd moved in with us temporarily, while Ben dealt with his family's legal troubles, bringing an unexpected peace to our fractured family. These were Dad's favorite, she said, patting the earth around a bulb. He used to plant them every fall, remember? I nodded, remembering how proud Nolan had been of his garden. Before the gambling, before everything fell apart. His lawyer sent another letter, Sarah continued, not looking up. He's agreed to testify against the gambling ring. Full confession, names, everything. What changed his mind? She pulled a crumpled envelope from her pocket. This came with it. He asked me to show you. Inside was a photograph, Nolan and Sarah at her 5th birthday party, both covered in cake frosting and laughing. On the back, he'd written, I forgot who I was trying to be this happy. Isla emerged from the house carrying lemonade, followed by Orion with a plate of cookies. Our blended family had found its rhythm, even as we navigated the aftershocks of Nolan's choices. Ben called, Isla announced, settling beside Sarah. The prosecutors are offering a deal. With his cooperation, they might reduce his parent sentences. Sarah's hands stilled in the dirt. Mom, I've been thinking about the house. The one Dad lost to the bank. What about it? Ben and I want to buy it back. Not to live in, but maybe as a fresh start. Something good from something broken. Aiden appeared in the doorway, watching us with quiet understanding. He'd shown me what love looked like without possession, what family meant without conditions. Camille sent over the last of the documentation, he said softly. The FBI's finished with everything. We can finally close that chapter. Not close, I corrected, watching my daughter's hands work the earth, planting hope in the same soil where betrayal had grown. Transform. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Rosalind, Nolan's mother, standing nervously on our porch. Since her son's arrest, she'd been trying to rebuild bridges, one awkward visit at a time. I'll get it, Sarah offered, brushing dirt from her knees. I invited her. She's trying. As Sarah went inside, Aiden took her place beside me. You okay? I watched through the window as my daughter hugged her grandmother, both of them crying and laughing at once. On the table between them, I could see another envelope, Nolan's handwriting visible on the front. He'll never change completely, I said quietly. But maybe that's not what this was about. What was it about? I thought of the photograph, of birthday cake and laughter, of tulip bulbs waiting to bloom. Learning to love what remains after forgiveness, even if it's not what we expected. Sarah returned with Rosalind, who clutched a familiar garden trowel, Nolan's old one. He wanted Sarah to have this, she explained, for the new house. My daughter took the trowel, running her fingers over the worn handle where her father's hands had gripped it countless times. Then she held it out to me. "Plant one with me?" she asked. "For the future?" As I knelt beside her in the dirt, Aiden's steady presence behind me and Rosalind watching through tears, I realized that sometimes the greatest act of love isn't in holding on or letting go. It's in planting seeds in soil that once seemed poisoned, believing that something beautiful might still grow. Sarah pressed a bulb into my palm. "It'll bloom by summer," she said softly. "Dad always said you have to trust the waiting." Yes, I agreed, thinking of all we'd lost and found and built again. "You do."
Leaving work early, I couldn't shake off a nagging feeling of dread. As I, Laura Bennett, a 28-year-old part-time marketing assistant, approached my home, the unease grew. My mind was racing, but I brushed off the anxiety as a side effect of not feeling well. Little did I know that my world was about to be turned upside down. Stepping into the silent house, I felt the atmosphere shift. The home I shared with my husband Daniel felt unfamiliar, almost hostile. Driven by an inexplicable instinct, I found myself tiptoeing towards the back room where muffled voices broke the eerie silence. My heart pounded against my chest, a sense of impending doom taking hold. I hesitated at the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the knob. The voices became clearer, a man and a woman, intimately engaged in conversation. Pushing the door open just a crack, I peered inside. The sight that greeted me was like a punch to the gut. Daniel, my husband of 3 years, was entwined with a younger woman. Their laughter and affectionate whispers were a stark contrast to the coldness and distance that had crept into our marriage. I stood there, frozen, as Daniel's words sliced through the last threads of trust I had clung to. "Marrying Laura was a mistake," he said, his voice laced with contempt. "Young and beautiful is what I deserve. Isabel, you make me feel alive." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I fought them back. This was not the time for weakness. I needed to be strong, to think clearly. Quietly, I closed the door and retreated, my mind racing with the betrayal I had just witnessed. It wasn't just the affair that hurt. It was the realization that the man I loved saw me as nothing more than a mistake. As I made my way to the living room, a plan began to take shape in my mind. I needed evidence, something concrete to expose them for what they were. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. No, who was I kidding? It was about both. I knew I had to be careful, to play my cards right. Daniel was a lawyer, cunning and persuasive. I couldn't confront him without solid proof, so I decided to gather evidence of his infidelity. It was time for me to step out of the shadows and take control of my life. In the days that followed, I became a silent observer in my own home, collecting pieces of their betrayal. Text messages, late-night calls, the subtle changes in Daniel's behavior, everything was a clue, a piece of the puzzle I was putting together. I was no longer the trusting, naive wife. I was a woman on a mission, a woman wronged, ready to strike back. As I lay in bed each night, planning my next move, I realized this was more than just about exposing Daniel and Isabel. This was about reclaiming my life, my dignity. I was ready to face the storm. I had to be. When Daniel and I first met, it felt like a scene out of a romantic movie. He was a charismatic lawyer, and I, a marketing assistant, found myself drawn to his confidence and charm. Our courtship was a whirlwind, filled with laughter, deep conversations, and promises of a future together. We married within a year, a decision that seemed right at the time, but now felt like a hasty mistake. Our married life began like a dream. Daniel was attentive, caring, and seemed genuinely interested in my life. But as the months passed, the facade began to crumble. He became more absorbed in his work, often returning late, and our conversations dwindled to mundane exchanges. One evening, as we sat in silence over dinner, I attempted to bridge the growing gap between us. "Daniel, we barely talk anymore. Is everything okay at work?" I asked, reaching for his hand. He withdrew his hand and replied coldly, "Work is fine, Laura. I'm just tired. You wouldn't understand the pressure I'm under." His words stung, creating a rift that only grew with time. As Daniel's detachment increased, so did my workload at home and the office. I tried to compensate for his absence by keeping the house perfect and excelling at my job, hoping it would bring back the man I fell in love with. Then came the day that marked the beginning of the end. Daniel, in a rare moment of candor, shared his thoughts on our marriage. Laura, you know I love you, but I feel like you're not pulling your weight financially. I'm carrying the burden of our expenses, and it's not fair. His words felt like a slap. I had been contributing as much as I could from my part-time job, cutting back on personal expenses to support our household. But Daniel, I've been trying my best. I'm already stretched thin between work and home, I protested. Daniel scoffed. Your best isn't good enough. Maybe if you worked harder or got a better job, we wouldn't be in this situation. His dismissive attitude left me reeling. I thought of the late nights, the unending household chores, and the sacrifices I had made for our marriage. It was clear that my efforts and my love were not enough for him. That night, I lay awake, contemplating our relationship. The man I married, the man I thought would be my partner in life, had become a stranger. His words echoed in my head, a constant reminder of the growing void between us. The seeds of doubt and resentment took root, setting the stage for the inevitable confrontation that would change everything. The days following that conversation felt like walking through a minefield. Daniel's indifference towards me grew, and with it my sense of isolation. I started to dread his return home each evening, not knowing which version of him I'd face, the cold, distant husband, or the one who saw me as a financial burden. One particularly tense evening, Daniel arrived home earlier than usual. I greeted him with a cautious optimism, hoping for a semblance of the warmth we once shared. "You're home early. Is everything okay?" I asked. Daniel's response was curt, his eyes void of any warmth. "I left early to talk about something important. We need to discuss our finances again." His tone was not inviting a conversation, but demanding a resolution. I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What about our finances?" I inquired, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about the mortgage, Laura. I'm not okay with shouldering most of the burden. You need to contribute more." His words were like daggers, undermining my efforts and sacrifices. I couldn't contain my frustration. "I'm already giving nearly all of my income towards the mortgage, Daniel. How much more do you expect me to contribute?" My voice was a mix of anger and desperation. Daniel leaned back, his expression one of annoyance. "That's not enough. You should consider increasing your work hours or finding a higher-paying job. Being cooped up at home isn't good for anyone." His suggestion hit me like a wave of ice-cold water. "Increase my work hours? I'm already struggling to balance my job with the housework you leave entirely to me." Daniel stood up, his demeanor turning hostile. "That's your job, Laura. I'm out working all day, earning for us. It's only fair you take care of the house, and frankly, you're not even doing a great job at that." I was stunned into silence. His words were not just hurtful. They were a complete dismissal of everything I had been doing for us, for our home. It was clear that in his eyes I was failing at being a wife, a partner. As he walked away, leaving me standing there, a mix of hurt and anger bubbling inside me, I knew something had to change. I couldn't continue living like this, constantly demeaned and undervalued. The man I married was gone, replaced by this cold, unfeeling stranger. That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of his words crushing me, I realized that my marriage was not just strained, it was broken, and I was the only one trying to fix it. It was time to stop. It was time to start thinking about myself, about my worth. And most importantly, it was time to start planning my escape from this toxic relationship. The days blurred together in a haze of resentment and disbelief. Daniel's demands and coldness continued, each word chipping away at the last remnants of our marriage. Then, one fateful day, I stumbled upon a truth that would change everything. I arrived home from work, expecting the usual empty house, only to find Daniel's car in the driveway. Confused, I entered quietly, only to hear laughter from the living room, a sound so rare in our home nowadays. Peering around the corner, my heart stopped. There was Daniel, cozy and relaxed, with Isabel, the same woman I had seen him with that day. Suppressing the urge to confront them, I retreated to the kitchen, my mind racing. This was no casual visit. The intimacy between them was palpable, undeniable. And then it hit me. Isabel wasn't just a fling, she was a full-blown affair. Later that evening, after Isabel had left, I faced Daniel. "Who is Isabel, really?" "She seems more than just a friend," I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Daniel's reaction was swift and dismissive. "She's just a colleague. Don't make a big deal out of it, Laura." But I knew better. The way he avoided my gaze, the tension in his voice, it was all too clear. Daniel was lying, and I was done being the fool. That night, I lay in bed, my mind made up. I needed proof of his betrayal, something concrete to expose him and free myself from this sham of a marriage. My plan was simple, yet risky. I would record their encounters, gather evidence of the affair. Over the next few weeks, I became a shadow in my own home, watching, waiting. The opportunity came sooner than expected. One afternoon, I returned home to find them together again. This time, I was prepared. With my phone discreetly positioned, I recorded their intimate conversation, their plans, their betrayal. As I listened to the recording later, a mix of sorrow and rage washed over me. But there was also a sense of empowerment. I had the evidence I needed. It was time to act, to end this farce and reclaim my dignity. With each step of my plan, a sense of clarity and determination grew within me. This was not just about revenge, it was about justice. For too long I had been a spectator in my own life, but no more. I was ready to face Daniel and Isabel, to expose their deceit. It was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. Armed with the evidence of Daniel's infidelity, I felt a newfound strength. It was no longer about salvaging a broken marriage, it was about exposing the truth and getting justice. But first, I needed an ally, someone who would be as impacted by this revelation as I was. My opportunity came unexpectedly. While going through Daniel's phone one evening, I discovered that Isabel was not only married, but her husband, James, was a prominent client of Daniel's firm. This was more than just personal. It was a professional bombshell that would have far-reaching consequences. I contacted James, introducing myself as Daniel's wife, and requesting a meeting under the guise of discussing an urgent matter about our spouses. We met at a quiet cafe, away from prying eyes. The look on James's face when I revealed the affair was a mixture of shock, anger, and betrayal. James's reaction was visceral. "Isabel and your husband? This is unbelievable. How long has this been going on?" he demanded, his voice shaking with emotion. I shared the evidence, watching as his face contorted with pain and fury. I had my suspicions, but this is concrete proof. She's betrayed me, and with your husband, no less. The plan was set into motion. James would confront Isabel and I would confront Daniel, both of us armed with the undeniable truth. It was a risky move, but I was past caring. I wanted to see Daniel's facade crumble, to watch him face the consequences of his actions. The confrontation with Daniel was cathartic. I watched as his face turned pale, his usual confident demeanor crumbling under the weight of his exposed secrets. "Laura, this isn't what it looks like. We can talk about this," he stammered, his voice betraying his panic. "No, Daniel, there's nothing left to talk about. I know everything. And so does James," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. The fallout was swift and devastating. James filed for divorce and cut all personal and professional ties with Daniel. Isabel's world came crashing down, and Daniel's career took a massive hit. But for me, it was a bittersweet victory. I had exposed them, but at the cost of my own marriage and the life I thought I had. As I watched Daniel's life unravel, I felt a sense of closure. It was a harsh lesson, but one that freed me from the chains of a loveless marriage. I was ready to move on, to rebuild my life on my terms. In the aftermath of the confrontation, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I watched as Daniel's meticulously constructed world fell apart. The man who once held himself with unshakable confidence was now a shadow of his former self, reeling from the impact of his own actions. The final blow came during a tense meeting at our lawyer's office to discuss the divorce proceedings. Daniel, looking defeated, tried to salvage what little he could from the ruins of his life. "Look, Laura, can't we sort this out amicably? Think about what you're doing here. This will ruin both our lives," Daniel pleaded, his voice laced with desperation. I looked at him, feeling a mixture of pity and revulsion. "Amicable? After what you did? You didn't think of our lives when you were with Isabel. It's too late for regrets, Daniel." Our lawyer, a stoic man, handed Daniel the divorce papers. "The terms are clear. Given the circumstances, there will be no alimony. You'll also need to agree on the division of assets." Daniel's face contorted in anger. "This is ridiculous. I earned most of this. She doesn't deserve half of my assets." I remained calm, my resolve unshaken. "I don't want your money, Daniel. I want my freedom, and you can keep your assets. I'm starting anew, far from the shadow of your deceit. The divorce was finalized swiftly. Daniel's career continued to spiral downward as the scandal became public knowledge. Isabel, on the other hand, faced her own set of consequences. Her marriage to James ended in a bitter divorce, and she was left to grapple with the social and professional fallout of her actions. As for me, I emerged from the chaos with a sense of liberation. I had lost my marriage, but I gained something far more valuable, my self-respect and independence. I sold the house, a place that once symbolized our shared dreams, and moved into a modest apartment, embracing my new beginning. My days were no longer filled with the dread of Daniel's return or the anguish of his betrayal. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life, rediscovering my passions, and reconnecting with old friends. The experience had changed me, but it also strengthened me. I realized that life often throws unexpected challenges our way, and how we respond to them defines us. I chose to stand up for myself, to fight back against betrayal and deceit, and in doing so, I found a resilience I never knew I had.